Hey everyone, welcome to the Walk to Wealth podcast. If you're tuning in on YouTube or any of the podcast directories, we just ask that you do one teeny tiny little favor. If you find any value in this episode or have found value in the episodes prior, we just ask that you refer us to a friend. We're trying to impact as many lives as we can on their walks to wealth. And so if you could just do this one teeny tiny little favor and just refer us to someone that you know who would find this valuable as well, that would mean the world to us. Without further ado, we have a very special guest with us today. Amani, for anyone that may not know you, tell us your elevator pitch. Who are you and what do you do?
My name is Amani Roberts. I'm a DJ, music producer, professor, live streamer, author. That's what I do, based in Southern California from the DC area. And I'm very happy to be here with you.
Amani, tell us a little bit about your walk to wealth. Where before you started finding the success that you have now, where does the story take place? Where does it all begin?
Yeah, I would think it all begins kind of growing up DC area, went to Howard University, grew up in hotels, worked in hotels throughout the majority of my life, whether it be in DC, Atlanta, Chicago, Dallas, Miami, back to DC, and then LA. All while I was really wanting to be a DJ, but didn't think it was a legitimate career. Later, I found out that was not true. So it took me a while to get started, but I started my DJ career when I moved to LA in 2007. Been over 15 years, almost 16 years now. And along the way, I've had lots of different lessons and amazing experiences. And that leads me to where I am today.
Yeah. And what can you tell us about the life in the hotel industry? As a lot of people, the average person in the US doesn't really move that much. And you were out and about from one location to another place. Before we even get into like the talks of your successes and everything, how was it like having to pivot constantly and shift your home base and go with the hotel industry?
Yeah. Moving can be very, very challenging. I was fortunate that I moved with jobs. So I had kind of at least a small start of like a built-in social setting and the jobs and working and had a network of people. Also, for me, like my college alumni association is pretty much worldwide. So that helped me kind of get adjusted too. But really, moving is not the easiest. And you just have to kind of, if you're fortunate to have a job when you move, just kind of get to know your peers, your colleagues, go from there. I also play soccer. So any city that I moved in, I would try to join one or two teams. That helped out tremendously also. Just kind of building in different hobbies that help you get adjusted, meet people outside of your work, and kind of build a nice, strong network of support and friends. And it just takes time. And it's not the easiest, but it's fun. And you meet new people and you get to explore different areas of the world. For me, even different time zones was different, just adjusting to like whether it be Central Standard Time Zone, now I'm in Pacific. It's weird, but that's something that was a cool adjustment also. So that would be my advice for people who are moving, trying to get adjusted.
Yeah, and networking, I feel like it's one of the key points to anything business related at all, or even just in life in general, even if you're not like in a business field, because it's not but it's who, right? And
Mhm.
what can you tell us about networking? What advice, what tips can you give us? Is there anything like secret tools or anything that you use to help your network grow substantially to where it is now? How has networking impacted you throughout your journey?
I think it definitely I would not be here today if it wasn't for networking. I think a couple tips would be this saying that I learned: the fortune is in the follow up. A lot of times we meet people at different events, whether it be a convention or just a regular 1 day event or classes or workshops, but then we never follow up with them. And I think that most time, if you can follow up with people and stay in touch and be genuine, that's good. I'm a fan of different trade associations within your trade, whatever you like to do. Like if you're a realtor, the National Association of Realtors is a really great trade association for me. Meeting Professionals International for my industry is a really great trade association. There's different associations for like lawyers, speakers. National Speakers Bureau is really good. So find your trade association on a local level, attend their local events, even try to attend their national events just so you can see the power of them. And I think that's kind of another like under the radar kind of gem to help people network and build, especially when we talk about building wealth, like build that network across the world.
Yeah, well, they say your network is your net worth, right? And
Yep.
I think one of the opportunities that I've been able to come across is I'm with Keller Williams, and they have massive communities within the communities and stuff. So for anyone, no matter where you come from or your upbringing, it's like there's always a group of people for you to get connected with within our real estate company, but also outside of that, like
Yeah,
the Connecticut Real Estate Investors Association was a good
exactly.
one for me. And then now I'm kind of like hacked the system where now I can podcast and I could tap into a bunch of different people that I would normally never have the opportunity to meet up with or connect with. And I just get to learn from all these people. How has podcasting kind of impacted you? I know you're kind of a DJ and, so usually, in control, you have the platform, the power is in your hands kind of, but how has that kind of helped you and with your connections and do all the things that you do?
I view like podcasting is like a really intimate form of networking. Like you and I, we're having an intimate conversation. It's like a masterclass with yourself or myself. And then that you can share that with everyone. And so it's like really a one-on-one. It's really intimate. I feel like podcasting and live streaming, because we're going to talk about that too, just opens your network up to the world because anyone can tune in. Anyone, whether they be in the UK, Australia, South Africa, they can tune into your podcast or your live stream and they can engage with you. And that's great because no longer are we restricted to who's seeing us in person, like who's seeing us, whether you be in Connecticut or LA or Miami, like people can watch us from Toronto, Canada. People can watch us from Sao Paulo, Brazil. Like we are not restricted geographically. And that's an amazing place to be in this day and age. And podcasting just lets you spread your network and people find you. And then you may see them at a conference. They live in London and you live in Chicago, but they see you at a conference and then that just strengthens the bond and it grows from there. It just allows you worldwide exposure that really was much more difficult to get back in the day.
Yeah, definitely. And you touched upon live stream a little bit too, which is another untapped gem that people don't really use. They think right now reels and shorts and everything, which is short form content, and is really what's popular right now. But how has live streaming helped you boost your business and grow as an entrepreneur and as a person as well?
Yeah, live streaming has allowed me to network and meet people all over the world. As I said before, it's allowed me to learn a new skill set, but a really crucial skill set, I think, moving forward, because it's always about like producing content. And if you can produce a live content, then you have all the other content that you can chop up and share across the platforms. It just allows you to have a more diverse tool belt. Like if you're working with potential clients and they're looking for you to assist them with maybe social media, looking for advice from you, taking into account your wisdom or expertise, and you can speak intelligently about live streaming. It just really adds a really unique tool set to yourself. I think it's the way of the future because everything is kind of live. I know we still have television, which is kind of still pre-recorded, but even there's some elements of TV that's live. And we know that the live events is when you have the moments, so to speak. And I just think it's the future and it's a good way to grow your business. It's pretty inexpensive. You just need decent bandwidth, a camera, a microphone, and you're off and running and you can build your kind of, what we call it, like your battle station. We kind of refer to it when you're all set up from scratch and just go from there. I love it. I think it's the future. We're living in it. It's only going to get more and more popular. So why not kind of embrace it right now?
Yeah, so let's get into it a little bit. Let's dive into it. So you mentioned the setting up your battle station. What advice could you give to people so that if they wanted to get into live streaming, they wanted to prep their battle station? What are some of the things they need to know? First with like technical stuff like equipment, but also like with like logistical stuff, like in terms of setting up, and then also in terms of just actually being a good host of the live. What are some tips you can give there from equipment and from logistics and from like just being a host as well?
Oh, so many. I think definitely take inventory of all the equipment you have at your home office right now. Like I bet you'll have an old phone that has a very good camera. The mobile phone cameras are phenomenal. You could have an old phone that has a camera. You could have an old camera. Right now I'm using like a Sony A6000, I believe. That's like a regular camera, but I can live stream it from it based on setting it up in a couple drivers. Like you don't need to buy stuff that's just hanging around the house. Microphone, the same way. You probably have an old microphone hanging around, maybe not. You can use your earbuds, comes with the cell phone. And then you go from there. You might have a couple monitors. Like I have tons of monitors. Like I have one in front of me, one to my left, one to my right, but you don't need to start there. And just see what you have. You have a computer, you might have a PC, a Mac, just kind of see what you have, work on it from there, figure out what works, what you need to replace. Then you can like upgrade. Like I have this really cool thing right here. I'm going to show you. This is called like a stream deck really quickly. We can push different buttons and have effects and change scenes. Like this is getting a little bit more advanced, but it's still cool. It's still easy to use. In terms of managing the chat, that takes practice. But when you first start off streaming like me, you might have 2 people in there, 3 people. So it's kind of easier to read, shout them out, keep doing what you're doing. And as you keep going, it'll grow. You'll get more and more people. And just call people out by name, remember where they're from, take notes, ask questions, say, oh, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name. Tell me if I'm pronouncing it right. If you can show that you're a human and that be vulnerable, it'll work. And just build on it slowly and surely. You can investigate different platforms. Like right now, we're using Riverside, there's StreamYard, there's OBS. There's so many platforms you can use to stream. Diversify your content. I would recommend putting it on like YouTube, put some things on Instagram, Twitter. I stream on Twitch, but then take that content and put it on YouTube. So make sure don't put all your eggs in one basket. I think that's very valuable too. And that's it. I mean, equipment we can go and talk about for a while, but that's just really take inventory of what you have in your home and then see what you need to get from there.
And so like the ability to, as with attention spans on the decline, being so like a good host that can manage the room and keep the energy up and keep people interested for, a long period of time. And so how would someone find something that's worthwhile, that's worth speaking about, that's worth going on live for? Because anyone could just pop up the camera and go live, but usually if you don't have nothing to talk about, or if you just are talking about anything, people will tune out for a little bit. So what advice would you give there so people could find something that's worth even going live for?
I would say, like, for example, it could be news that has to do with like your company. Like if you have a new product that you're offering, you can go live, talk about the product. We'll use kind of your industry as an example. Like say, like they raise interest rates. So now if you're trying to buy a home and like the 30-year interest rate has gone up, maybe you have a mortgage broker and you on talking about just ways to still get low interest rates and how this affects the industry, because people will read about it. But if they can see you talking about it and you with an expert, that helps because then they can ask questions if they're wondering, oh, well, what if someone asks a question, oh, what if I'm in like a 5-1 and I'm self-employed, so I don't have a lot of money showing on my W-2. What should I do? Like those are questions that people are asking. So if you can speak to that when you go live, that's just cool. It's good content. You're learning, your audience is learning, people are going to spread the word, and that's it. So I think those are two good ways. Also, whenever you have the opportunity, maybe like you're talking to someone and they like are really, really knowledgeable about a topic and you want to share what they're saying and ask them questions to a live audience, like that's good because you can ask your questions, record the session. It's there live with people to engage, and then it's there once it's finished also. So I love to say like PR, company announcements, any breaking news that has to do with your industry, and then maybe just a subject matter expert that you want to talk to, but also share their wisdom with your audience.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea, especially the third one. I feel like one of the beauty of whether it's live streaming or podcast and just getting on any platform and speaking to a credible person in that industry is that no matter who you speak to, you're always the common denominator, right?
Yeah.
And so your credibility then starts to build up and you start to boost up and you start to learn, but people see you in every interview. So you look as if, even though you may not have mentioned anything, you seem like the more credible guy because everyone's only making guest appearance and you're the guy with the platform, or you're the girl with the platform with the show that everyone else is coming on. And that kind of, I've been seeing it kind of now for me, where it's like, I'm trying to get a lot of guests, but it's like, I've been dropping so many episodes now. People think that I'm the credible guy because I'm where the people flock to kind of. And it definitely helps for anybody because it kind of gets over that, oh, well, I'm new, or, oh, well, I don't have that much experience, or, oh, well, it kind of gets rid of those excuses because you could kind of the credibility in the past experiences of your guests that you bring on to make you, while you learn the ropes, they'll lead the control, the conversation. As long as you ask the right questions, the guests will showcase their expertise, but you'll always look like the credible person because you just so happen to be the host. And so that's kind of what I've been using. And so let me ask you this though, because as you know, with anything, it takes a while to start growing, especially live stream, because to get people's attention in this busy day and age, to stop whatever you're doing or to incorporate what you're doing to their day and their routines, it's very hard, especially when you're first starting off, to hop on a live and you look at the live and there's no one in the live. And so, what did you do to kind of overcome that when you were first starting off? Because it takes usually a while, whether it's live or maybe it's Clubhouse or Twitch or, but to get those people on. But what did you do to start getting those people on? And once they did get on, you kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, be a human, but what else did you do to make sure that they came, it was worthwhile to come back the following day or the following week, whenever your next live was going to be?
I think first, it took me a while to get here, like pick specific days that you want to go live and kind of stick to a schedule. We are creatures of habit. So if we know you're going to go live at 5 p.m. Eastern every Tuesday, then we can build that into our schedule. Even if maybe we're driving, we can say, oh, if we're commuting home, we'll still turn on John and listen to him. So stick to a schedule. One thing for me that really helped out was it was middle of pandemic. So I'm not sure how realistic it is now, but there was a time period in like August, September 2020 when I went live that was a 30-day challenge. So 30 days in a row, it turned into a 54-day challenge. And that really helped me kind of grow the audience, build the habit, get people more followers, and then people tuning in. Because really followers doesn't really matter. You just need the people to show up live. Like you can have 30,000 followers, but 5 people in their live. You can have 300 people following you and 200 people in their live. So I would say that. And then collaborations. Like for me, I started to collaborate with other people, bringing them on my channel pretty early on because I had this show called Twitch University and we were learning about live streaming on the fly, and I would interview people and they would share what their setup was, and they talk about what they've learned in their journey. So collaborations really kind of helped me level up too. And then it's just keep going, like consistency. You'll have some ups, you'll have some downs. Like definitely over the summer, audiences are more sparse because people are just out and about when the weather, especially in North America, when the weather is better, they don't inside. So keep that in mind. Give
Yeah.
yourself grace because there could be some days I have 100 or 150 people in my stream, my live. There could be other days when I have 5 or 10. So it's hard. Try not to let that affect you. Also, I found this is a hack that I love to share. People don't pay attention to the number of people that are live when you're streaming. Only look at it afterwards. So you're not staring at that number that doesn't affect you when you're streaming. I think that's one that we don't really hear about at first. But if you're going to go live, if you can, try to either cover it up, hide the number of people that are watching you live. So that way you don't worry. So you're going to act the same, whether you have 3 people in there or you have 300. I think that's also very effective too. Those would be some examples just of what to do, how to grow, and really it's just consistency, sticking with the schedule. If you have a schedule change, to share it with your audience. Also take breaks. Like for me, this is probably the first time I've been in an interview in a while, but like I'm going to go live today and I took on a week off and it was needed. So take breaks, give yourself grace, be consistent, get a schedule and collaborate.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I love how you mentioned collaboration because as we grow up in the school system up here in the North America, we've always been taught like collaboration is cheating. That's why we
Mm,
take tests on our own, right? That's why we have
yeah.
to do our own essays. It's like a lot of times, and we kind of grow up, unless you play like sports,
Mhm.
but for most of the time, like collaboration is something that's kind of frowned upon. How has collaboration impacted you, and what would you tell to someone that's kind of getting over the fear of collaboration? Or it might even just be that, oh, they'll never want to collab with me. They're too far ahead of me or something like that.
Mhm.
Because that's always a limiting belief that pops up. Or I'm new, They don't want, why would they want to collab with me? I don't have anything to offer. So what advice would you kind of give there?
First, like definitely what they say, comparison is the thief of joy. So don't compare yourself to someone else. You can't compare your chapter 2 to someone else's chapter 26. That's just a fact. Like people have been doing this for a long time and they've had their own journey. So, and they understand. I think definitely ask. You would be surprised how many people, if you ask somebody, say, oh, I can do this or I can do this. They could say no, but at least ask. And my favorite saying, one of them is if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think that kind of speaks to collaboration. And like for me, that allowed me to level up my channel so many ways, just from large people who are larger streamer than me, people that are smaller streamers than me, like definitely collaborate with all different audience sizes and ask. And as long as you ask and you have a list of people, maybe you have a list of 10 people and if 3 people say yes, that's better than 0. And just keep asking. And then maybe once you collaborate with one person, say, okay, I really enjoyed this collaboration and working with you. Is there anyone else you think I should reach out to that would be a good fit for me to collaborate with again? And then they just keep asking and they'll give you people. And because they referred you to this person, like, oh, well, since, John Doe referred me, then definitely I'll collaborate with you. And that's it. I think try not to overthink it. Don't overanalyze it. Just say, hey, would you like to do this? I'm doing this. Would you want to come on the show? Maybe you want to share a pre-recorded reel or something. Just ask, offer them options, and you would be surprised at who says yes and who, then people start asking you to collaborate.
Yeah. And so when you start asking these people, you start shooting your shot, as we say, and you start getting a couple yeses, right? And some of the times when we start getting some of these yeses, we're not prepared for some of these yeses. We're like, oh my goodness, they said yes, they're going to collab with us. What could someone do to be prepared so that when they have the guest show on, they're not nervous, they're not underprepared, they're not asking bad questions or anything like that? What could someone do once they finally get the courage to actually say, hey, you want to collab? And then they actually get a yes, because that's then another step of preparation there that we have to get into. So How does one prepare to receive a guest onto their platform?
I'm a really big fan of doing research, like definitely researching your guests so you know things about them that you can ask as part of the conversation to kind of settle you down, settle the person you're interviewing down. I think once people realize really quickly that you've done your research, like you know about their history, maybe you listen to a few previous interviews they've done and you understand what they are and you ask questions that most people who are just kind of doing a surface level interview wouldn't ask, and very quickly they say, okay, this person is serious. They've done their research. I got to lock in because they are coming to me at a high level. So I need to match their level. I'm a big fan of Debbie Millman, and she's an amazing podcast. She's amazing creative. Like she's graphic designer, just amazing author. She's been running Design Matters, this podcast for, I think now it's on her 13th or maybe 15th year. And the research that she does for every guest that she interviews is phenomenal. Like she can give a master class on many things. Particularly, I want to take her masterclass on research because she just kills it. And I can't wait to hopefully one day meet her because she just does a phenomenal job. And I think research can really set you apart and you don't have to get too crazy. Spend an hour or two. If you're interviewing someone, maybe listen to a previous interview they've done both recently, but also listen to an interview they've done 5 or 6 years ago, because you can see what they were saying then. And maybe they've made some changes or they've grown from there. This is work, and many people don't want to do the work, but if you can build it in and do the research, it will quickly set you apart from other people who are doing similar things, but also it'll get you a quick and a high level of respect from whomever you have on your live stream.
Yeah. Okay. And so then to kind of wrap it all together, right? They finally said yes. They hop on. You do your research. They come on well. What are some things that you would do afterwards, after they collab with you and hop on your show, to make sure you really secure that connection and have something that not just like a one and done, but you genuinely made someone that you could potentially collab with in the future again, and make sure that they also leave on a high note as well, not just you.
Definitely stay in touch with them. If you have a mailing list, just like add them to your mailing list. If you see an article or something online that references their industry or something they spoke about in the interview, definitely shoot them a note. Say, hey, I read this and I thought about our conversation that we had during the show. Hope you're doing well. That's it. Don't ask for anything. If you send those kind of follow-ups and then maybe you support them online, like if they're posting on Instagram or LinkedIn, absolutely connect with them on LinkedIn, by the way. I forgot to say that. And just comment on their posts, like it. Don't be over the top. Don't be too salesy, but just be authentic. I think that's the way you're going to build. They'll remember you. They will
Yeah.
remember you for sure. And just keep in touch. And you never know when you might need to talk to them again, or they might ask you to come on their platform or whatever. But if you can do that consistently, that will have a really big impact on your business and your podcasting or live stream.
Yeah, definitely. And it kind of goes back to the idea of the fortunes and the follow up that you mentioned earlier. And kind of
Mm,
to tie it back full circle, because a lot of these people, we have these connections. It's more like an intimate conversation. It's a one on one. We're usually talking for a longer duration of time. And a lot of people are just like, thank you for hopping on the show. And that's kind of it. And it just ends there. And you might have had someone that wanted to send XYZ opportunities to you, but because you failed to reach out, didn't stay in touch, that those opportunities were passed down to probably the next person that were probably meant for you, but you decided not to follow up or not to just check in with them or not to see how they were doing or not to connect with them on LinkedIn, as you said. How do we then turn this from something that's just a little hobby into something that we could probably scale and to turn more than just a hobby? Because, most of the time when, the snowball starts to roll, it turns to avalanche quicker than we
right.
realize it actually does. And then it just starts going and then we're playing catch up. Now we have to like work systems and stuff like that. And we're always behind. How can we kind of like turn this from a hobby into something and kind of stay ahead of the ball so that we don't have to play catch up and we don't have to scramble around to try and figure everything out? We can kind of have at least some system in place to kind of like stay in control of it as much as we can while it grows.
Yeah. I remember when I was in direct sales, this was a saying, like, if you treat it like a hobby, it'll pay you like a hobby. If you treat it like a business, it'll pay you like a business. And so really, just to keep it simple, like if you want to turn this into something that's like legit more than a hobby, you got to put the time in to make sure that you're doing the work, planning out and being consistent, planning out your episodes in advance, and just take it and run with it and be serious about it. Like if you treat it like a hobby, oh, I'll do it one this week, then you wait 3 weeks, oh, I'll do something in 3 weeks. Like, okay, then that's a hobby. But if you're on it every week, you're doing something, you're planning out on Monday, you're going to research, Wednesday, you're going to invite people, Friday, you record and you keep that schedule. then it will grow, you'll gain momentum, and then it'll be like a business.
Now that's amazing advice. And a lot of people tend to treat the things they love doing as something they love to do. And that's one of the things I kind of realized back in high school when I had the opportunity to play college football. I didn't have any like D1 offers. I wasn't that good at it, but I had a couple D2, D3 offers. And I had to ask myself, is this something that I would love to do as a job? Because a lot of the times we have passion, we have things that we love doing and don't realize that there's a fine line between and like genuinely loving doing something and then loving something as a job because it's
Mhm.
different when there's money involved. It tends to take
Yes.
things into like a difference. How do you know that this live streaming, wasn't just a hobby for you or DJing wasn't just a hobby for you, but something that you actually wanted to turn into a business? And how do you make that mental shift to do such?
I saw early on how it could help me grow my business because one of the goals when I wrote my book was that I want to become a thought leader in the space. So I could see very quickly how live streaming could also add that to me by allowing me to talk to people, by allowing me to share part of the journey that I'm going through. So it just fit right into my whole brand and just growing my business. So really quickly, I figured that out. I think for people who are searching, like, if they have a business, whether it be like real estate business or a DJ like mine, and you're looking to distinguish yourself and make yourself different, like this is it. Like you can do this. Not very many people that I know, especially like DJs. I know a lot of DJs that live stream. They have Twitch and everything. But in terms of adding the live streaming and then doing like the game shows, interview shows, and DJing, like that's rare. So however you can morph it into making yourself unique and adding it as a consistent element to your business, and that's the way to go. And that'll quickly distinguish yourself from any other people in your space.
Yeah, no, I love that you mentioned the idea of being a thought leader. And with this, what everything just being so overly saturated now, because as you mentioned earlier, now that we have access to these platforms where we could be seen on a global scale, that means we also have to compete with people on a global scale, even if they're not in your market, because you don't know who's from where. You just see that that guy is a DJ. So let's say you're in Pacific time now, you're in Cali now, right? So
In
let's
LA.
say in LA, right? So if someone was out in DC, but I seen both of you guys' live stream for DJing, I don't know who's who, but when I think DJ, I might think that other person, even though I live in Cali with you, but that person's all the way in DC because that's kind of messing with people now. And being a thought leader kind of helps distinguishes you. And so for anyone that kind of may not know, what is a thought leader? At least your definition of a thought leader. And you kind of already mentioned why, but how could someone get into becoming a thought leader? Why is face, voice, and video the wave of the next future of marketing now?
Yeah. Thought leader, my quick definition would be a person within a certain industry that is known and respected for their knowledge in that industry. And they continue to be a leader in that industry, both through their sharing of information, through their actions, and through their stewardship to bringing other people up within that same industry. Like a thought leader is one you would see for me in the DJ world. Okay, Amani, he DJs 3, 4, 5 days a week. He also speaks at conferences. He's an author. He is a professor, a teacher. So he is touching all the different elements of the industry to first educate people, whether it's speaking or teaching, showing through actions that he can do it through DJing, putting his experience and his journey down on papers through a book, and then continuing to share and bring people in that might not necessarily consider themselves part of the industry through like volunteering, through trade associations, professional speaking. You add all those elements up and that adds to myself working on being a thought leader in the space. And that's kind of would be my answer to that.
So you kind of mentioned the elements are so getting something on paper, actually doing the do, right? Finding a way to volunteer, give back, not even in just in your industry, but across other industries to give more awareness to the industry that you're in. And then public speaking, I said, your conferences, you
Yeah.
said it's so speaking.
Yeah.
So those are the four elements that would cultivate a thought leader, right?
Yeah. Now, when I
As
say professional speaking, you can also do virtually. Like there's a lot of virtual conferences where you can just hop on the Zoom, you have your microphone, you're speaking about a topic for 10 to 15 minutes, and you keep doing that. Eventually, people are going to invite you to in-person conferences and you have a good balance. Once people start to see you speaking at a conference or for a webinar, like that's a really big deal. And you add more of those credits to your resume like that. that is a substantial help. And then you have a book that kind of is behind it. Like that's kind of where people kind of value, okay, well, this person is legit. Like they speak, they have a book, they're in the field, they're in like the trenches. Like I love to say, like, it's really easy for people to criticize you from afar. But if they're not in the trenches on the playing field with you in the battle, then that kind of makes their criticism a little bit have less merit. But if someone's in here with you and they're giving you advice or something, then that has more merit. And so people see you in the trenches consistently, speak, working, taking action, writing, then that really elevates you.
Yeah, definitely. And we live in a society now where the average person fears public speaking more than they fear death, right?
Yes.
So, what advice would you kind of give there? Because a lot of people they're terrified, whether it's virtually, whether it's God forbid they get on an actual stage with people in front of them. But what advice would you kind of give there to like kind of get over that fear of public speaking so that their voice, their message, their experience, their knowledge can be heard because it needs to be heard. Because although they might not be the most knowledgeable, their story resonates more with someone else. And I always tell this on the pre-show. I always ask in the beginning of the show, what's your walk to wealth? Because if your story resonates with someone else's story, they're going to listen to you so much more. They're going to be more impacted by your knowledge. So, what advice do you give so people can get over their public speaking fear and start to give out their message?
That's a great question. It's not easy. I would say a couple things, simple things, but when you're getting ready to speak, listen to maybe some of your favorite songs, something that will make a smile come to your face. If they have walk-up music for you when you're speaking, have them play one of your favorite songs with walk-up music. When you first start speaking, whether it be virtually or in a specific in-person speech, maybe try to tell a story that is easy for you to tell. So you don't have to worry about reading from a prompter or reading from a card. Just tell a story. Like maybe the first time I was DJing, this happened. And that would be a story I might tell. Tell lots of stories throughout your speech. Try to have like a topic. Like if you're speaking about resilience, share a personal story about how you were resilient. That way the less you have to memorize, the better. So if you could tell these stories about these different topics and then relate it back to whatever topic you're speaking of, you've been requested to speak of, it really helps because that's where we run into trouble. It's because we try to memorize and we're so dependent on like our scripts or cue cards. But if you're just telling stories from the heart, first people are going to realize, wow, they're just kind of telling stories, but then they're relating it to the message, to the subject we're studying. And that helps. Of course, it takes practice. So I do recommend practicing, but those would be some quick kind of ideas in terms of the fear. Really play music, smile. If you're in a big audience, in a big crowd, try to find people in the audience that are like your kind of checkpoint back home. Like you want to check with someone on the left side. And try to find someone who's got like a happier smile so that they can kind of feedback you in the middle, on the right side. Just check with them. So people will be nodding or smiling and just tell your stories. Definitely practice. You can write out your speech, but try what works for me. It's taken many years is try to have different topics that you want to cover, but don't write out everything you want to say. And that takes practice, but that will help you and just tell stories. If you have slides, use this. And I tell my students this all the time. We're always practicing presenting. Use the slides as a guide. Don't read from the slides. That's not very good. So use them as a guide. Make sure there are pictures there. There's certain what we call like ticklers. Ticklers are things that remind you of what your message is that you want to share. So if you have a slide and say you're talking about creativity and I'll have a picture of like Debbie Millman on there because she's an amazing creative. I have a picture of me DJing, then I have a picture of maybe the book, The Artist's Way. So within that slide, I'm going to talk about how one of my role models is Debbie Millman because she's an amazing creator. She does this and that. So I'm telling a story. I'm also sharing some information for people who else they can follow. Then I'm going to talk about DJing and just how I got a DJing. And people love to hear stories. Like this is how I plan out my sets. This is how I'm being creative. Then I'll talk about the book, The Artist's Way, which this is like a handbook that really has helped me unlock even more creativity. So you can see those three pictures in that one slide allow me to speak about creativity and share some of my expertise. Then you have the next slide, more pictures. And I found that works the best for me. I'm still getting better and improving myself, but for now, I've gotten to a level where that works best for me. It really resonates with people. And then you combine that with music and you have a very memorable presentation.
Yeah. From as early on as I can remember growing up, PowerPoints, we've always done them in school, especially for like science projects and things like that. And when I think about it now, if I were to try to sit back and look through any of those PowerPoints, how bored to death I would be. Well, you kind of gave some tips as to what to do and making a PowerPoint. What are some
Mm,
don'ts that we should avoid so we don't suffer from death by PowerPoint?
mm, Don't have too many words on the slides. Try to limit the amount of words, text. Don't read from them. Don't use PowerPoint and don't use Google Slides. I'm a big fan of Canva. If you can use an app like Canva that can make your PowerPoints interactive, there's moving things, use that. I recommend using videos in your PowerPoint. It can be a video that's playing while muted while you're talking, because our attention spans are such now that we can do two things at once now. Where we can see a video playing, but you're speaking about it. I think that's a really, really good tip that's not used enough. Like if there's a video playing, but on mute, you can talk about it as it's playing. Use GIFs or whatever that kind of interact and do things like that. Make sure you have good colors. If you like bright colors, use bright. If you like different themes, use different colors in the PowerPoint. Try not to have too many slides, like keep them pretty succinct. And it's okay, just the words and reading from them. Do not read from the slides, use them to tell the story. That's what I'm really working with my students on, because it's tough. You want to use it as a crutch, but just use it to tell stories. And then I think a hidden gem is just engage with your audience, whether it be virtual or in person. Like have a conversation with the audience, ask questions. Like we're talking and I say, okay, who here feels that they're creative? And there's some people raise their hands. Okay, well, tell me, what kind of creative are you? Oh, what kind of creative are you? Ask questions. And you can take a minute or two in your presentation to ask questions. It gets the audience engaged. You get to know each other. I can feed off their answers and say different points that I want to cover. And then as you go through your presentation, maybe you have a slide that's coming up about resilience. You can say, oh, well, I remember, Mary, you talked about this and how you haven't started. What have you learned now? So you can always come back to it. So you're listening. So you show the audience that you're listening to them as well. It's just really powerful. It just takes a lot of practice in that. And that's kind of some PowerPoint presentation tips. But my favorite one is don't use PowerPoint. Use Canva, some other apps like that are really cool. I'm trying to think of the others. There's a couple others that are really interactive, but use those.
There's one that I learned in I think middle school, not middle school, high school. I learned it called Prezi. That's pretty good.
Yes.
Uh,
There you go.
and
That's Prezi.
Prezi is pretty good. I haven't used it in quite a while, but they always come up with really interesting things. And I wanted to talk to you about one thing that kind of people forget to do when speaking because they're too caught up in their speech, whether it's them trying to remember the lines or them trying to remember what's the next word or whatever it may be. Um, how does one control the room? You do it as a DJ all the time. You know how to read the room, how to read the event, how to read the venue. You do it all the time with your music. You also do it when you're speaking. From both of your experiences there, both speaking and DJing, what advice would you give so that people control the room and make sure that everyone is captivated and engaged and present the entire interview? Because most people doze off. Most people are going to be leaving. Some people are going to be, a phone might ring in the middle of your interview. I mean, in speech, and you still have to keep on going. So it's like, how does one stay in control of the room no matter what factors or what things get thrown at them and to ensure everyone kind of stays engaged?
And with DJing, we have to have high emotional IQs because we can see, okay, if you're playing songs and people are starting to come to the dance floor, you might want to stay in that lane. If you maybe switch it up and play a different genre of song and people are starting to leave the dance floor, you might want to kind of go back to what was working. So you kind of have to identify what's working, keep a couple like for sure hit songs in your pocket that will bring people back to the dance floor and then use that. But if you see people nodding their heads, singing along, coming to the dance floor, grabbing their friends, giving them to come to the dance floor, then you might want to stay in that lane for a while. You can always switch it up and maybe move on to something else, but definitely try to test it. You're always testing, see what works. There's no two crowds are ever the same. In terms of speaking, like you want to kind of pay attention to who's kind of keeping eye contact with you, nodding their heads, who might be raising their hand if you ask a question, saying answers, speaking, laughing. Like if you can kind of watch that and control the room, and maybe if you notice the room being a little flat, ask a question, maybe put on some music, something. I have to do it every week when I'm teaching. Because class, you have to read the room. You want the people, the students, stay engaged. So, for example, if I'm in a class and I have certain activities planned, but I notice we're getting kind of flat, I might have to skip through some of the slides or some of the things, content, and get to something else that's more group oriented or a project based because I want to keep them active and engaged. But I had to learn the hard way because I've had many classes when I was first starting that were just kind of flat. But you know that for me, if I'm teaching like a 2.5 hour class, the first 15, 20 minutes, maybe I can teach and talk and think. Well, then we have to do some group activities. Then we have to bring in some sort of competition. Competitions work really well in speech if you can build in some sort of competing competition. Trivia is also very well. So just different elements that allow you to stay engaged with the audience, keep them in your back pocket, whether you're DJing or speaking, and use them when you see things maybe getting a little flat, and you'll be pleasantly surprised at how you can bring people back.
Yeah. One of the things that people tend to do a lot when public speaking is use stories, as you mentioned. How could one kind of become a good storyteller so that they can tell things in a way that makes people want to listen more? And when you're first starting off, a lot of people don't have experience. So it's like, it's hard to tell stories. What advice would you give to just in terms of just actual storytelling itself? There's
Yeah.
a guy named, I forget his name, but the hero with a thousand faces, the hero's
Oh,
journey. I
mhm,
forget his name. It slipped my mind. I was just watching something about him the other day, but
mhm.
about how all kind of stories have a storytelling formula. Is there something like that that you kind of use when you give your speeches, or tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, I would urge people if they're looking at speaking to kind of write down maybe some of their favorite stories about themselves. Because if you're a human and you're an adult, you have some stories. It could be how you got through a tough class in high school, or how did you adjust when you moved somewhere there, or how did you find a new job when you weren't happy? Like, you have some stories inside of you, you just need to write them down. If you don't, try to find someone's story, like who you admire. So for example, for me, I admire a Sarah Blakely from Spanx. She was the creator of the company Spanx. An amazing story where she used to sell, I think it's copy machines. She used to sell copy machines on for her main job, and she created a company on the side at nights and weekends. And she went to pitch her product to an executive, I think at Nordstrom's, and she was in the bathroom with this executive, just showing her the product and making her pitch. I think it's an amazing story. Now recently she just kind of sold the company to Blackstone, and she's just got a new CEO coming on board, but her story resonates and I love it. So I don't mind sharing it with people. So find some people's stories who you really love and share it with them, and then also share with the audience and share why it resonates with you. And so I think those are two things. Write down your stories. I'm sure we have some. You can go back to grade school, high school, college, write down some of your favorite stories about your life, and then find some stories about people who you really admire. Like I told you a story about like Debbie Millman. Like I could tell stories about her. You could tell stories about The Rock, how he tried to be professional sports, didn't work out, went into wrestling, had to work his way up from the bottom. Still now he gets up at 4:45 in the morning, working out. He's just an incredible work ethic. Like if you want to talk about work ethic, you can use his story as your story and share it with him, and people will understand and relate it to you, to him, and go from there. So do a lot of writing, a lot of preparation, and then pick and choose what stories you want to share.
Who were some of the people that kind of impacted you and that you kind of either maybe looked up to, or stories that really impacted you and helped you get through some of the difficult times? 'Cause that's whether it's DJing or whether it's starting your own business, whatever it is, we all face hard times. And so what kind of some of the stories that, helped you get through a lot of your trials and tribulations along your journey?
Yeah. So of course, like my father, I look up to him. He didn't really have he had a not a rough upbringing, but he worked really hard. So I looked up to him for work ethic. Like Charlie Wilson, the singer from the Gap Band, like he went through some tough times, and he's still coming on top. I love his story. I love Luther Vandross's story, who Luther didn't even believe in himself. It was David Bowie who believed in him more than he believes in himself, and wanted to push him to be better. I think that's a phenomenal story. I learned all these from like autobiographies and things like that. Other people's stories are presented, like David Goggins. He's got an
Hmm.
amazing story. Listening to his book, it was just, whew, it was on fire. Those are some of the stories that kind of I look to. Les Brown, or a really big fan of Les Brown. He's got a couple speeches on YouTube that I have been a little delinquent. I haven't listened to them lately. I need to get back and listen to them more because I'm
Hmm.
slipping. He's one. He's a great one. I have a whole list of like speeches online that are good that I listen to that help me. So yeah, that's kind of, I never really had to answer like that question, but that's my answer as I'm thinking about it.
Right, and I feel like for me, growing up, I was more of the quotes person. I didn't really have stories, but I always had quotes for everything. Like, because like
Yeah.
for me, I was always kind of isolated, so I would have like a quote where you tell me anything, or I'm going through anything. I had a quote that matches that exact thing that I'm feeling, or a quote that is matching the exact piece of advice that I need to give myself or give somebody else. One of the quotes that really helped me get through a lot is, I actually heard this in a freestyle, so it wasn't even an actual quote; it was a song lyric, but it wasn't an actual song. I think some random video I seen on Facebook is, if life was easy, it wouldn't be worth living. God gives his best soldiers the worst missions. And
Hmm.
I don't remember the rest of his freestyle. That was literally the opening line, and that's
Yeah.
the only line I remembered. And like little quotes like
Yeah.
that really help to kind of like, just when the bad days or when things get hard, I remember things like that, and always seem to put a couple more gallons of fuel back in my tank, so to push me through the storm, help me keep on going.
One quote that you reminded me of, that my friend and mentor, because I really love what she's doing, Judy Holler said was she says in her book, and she speaks about it, she said, easy choices, hard life. Hard choices, easy life, which means that if you can go through life and make the hard choices consistently, you're eventually going to have an easier life. And so that's one to kind of live by. It's really difficult, but I really love that one. And I love her explanation for it.
Yeah, it's also very counterintuitive because it's like
Mhm.
easy choices, hard life. I don't get it. How does that work? And it kind of goes back to like the thing of like delayed gratification. We didn't really talk about it too much in this episode, but the hard choices is because, mm, I mean, sometimes it's just bad decisions, but sometimes if you know you're making a good decision, anything worthwhile is going to be difficult. It's going to be on the opposite side of something that's hard or difficult. Back to the hero's journey. The hero in that story had to go slay the dragon that was trying to kill the village and slay it. You have to fight that dragon, whatever that dragon may be in your life, whether, you know, it's overcoming addiction or whether it's trying to repair a relationship with a parent that wasn't really there or whatever that may be. But there's always a dragon in your life that you kind of have to slay. And until you slay
Mhm.
that dragon, pretty much it's going to be very hard for you to really move on to what you're meant to reap and sow because there's always going to be the dragon's always going to be there hovering over, ready to attack because you haven't slayed him yet.
Yeah.
And so, Amani, you mentioned a lot of gems throughout this entire episode. You mentioned you kind of have a book. I know you're doing a lot. Where could anyone get in touch with you?
I mean, you can follow me at socials like Amani Experience on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and then Amani Roberts on LinkedIn, twitch.tv/ Amani Experience. But really, you can also go just to AmaniExperience.com. That's our website. And that's where I try to keep most of my things. So connect with me there. Socials. The book is DJs Mean Business. It's available on Amazon or whatever your book provider is. There's the second edition, which is on Audible. I released that about a year ago. And so, yeah, that's kind of where you can reach me. Hit me up. I'll always respond back and start a conversation. And yeah, that's the best way to catch me.
Perfect. And Amani, it's time for our final four, my favorite segment of the podcast.
All right.
So, first question: what is the most impactful lesson that you've learned in life?
Most impactful lesson will be when I wasn't good enough to pass DJ school at first. So I had to swallow my pride, decide I was committed, come back and take the final class, which is an extremely difficult class. I had to rebuild some of my fundamentals. I had to take this class over again. And there's no guarantee you'll get it because it's all subjective. So I was able to pass it with one of the highest scores ever. And that was just probably the most valuable lesson I've had in terms of resilience.
What is the most admirable trait that a person can have?
Mm. Active listening, just being a really good listener.
If you had to change someone's life with one book, what would you recommend?
The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron.
Okay. And what is the legacy that you're trying to leave behind?
Someone who had the courage to step outside and leave the corporate kind of rat race to pursue the creative life, was able to do it in a respectful and admirable way and be able to flourish doing what they love and also just consistently giving back to the community and bringing people into the industry through the teaching that I'm doing.
That's amazing, Amani. And I just want to thank you again for hopping on the podcast. You know, as you know, all good things must come to an end, unfortunately. And I really enjoyed our conversation. I like all the tips about public speaking. And this episode might not release for a while, but at this point in time, I'm also personally trying to get into the speaking world myself. So this is all definitely stuff that I'm going to use in my personal life because I'm now starting to get into opportunities where the podcasting and live streaming is starting to open up doors for me. So I genuinely appreciate the advice that you came here and hopped on. I really meant a lot. So thanks again, Amani, for hopping on the show and I look forward to staying in touch.
Likewise, my pleasure. I appreciate you inviting me, John, and we'll definitely keep in touch.